Travis Wingate. So, well, now that the prophets have been caught with their hand in the tithing jar, stealing from God. Ooh, bad news, flash. Prophecy fulfilled. Check. It's important for Mormons to understand the church ain't true. You can't have prophets that steal. Can't have prophets who lie. Can't have prophets who cover up crime, corruption, sin. You can't have prophets who murder. You can't have prophets who are adulterers. You can't have prophets who lead Mormons astray. You can't have more prophets who are white supremacists, which includes racist, sexist, bigoted, haters of the poor. You can't have prophets who are bad. That makes them false. They're the villains of Scripture. And the church prophets have been caught stealing. Ex-Mormons have already been exposing the church for having lied about church history. The church confessed to that too. Remember? Joseph Smith used to be a translator of God. Now he's just a revelator with a rock and a hat. Where'd that rock and a hat come from again? They still will not tell us that he was arrested for glass looking on the 20th of March, 1826. Wait, he had to Urim and Thummim before he was allowed to touch it? And take it out? Well, yes. Yes, it is the case. And so, yeah, they know that they're lying. They know they're the bad guys. But Mormons are not getting it through to their head. If you don't recall, in grade school, there used to be this thing called bullies and mean girls. And it wasn't because they wouldn't let us sit next to them in lunch. It's because they were physically and verbally abusive, deceiving to get their victims to do things that they can laugh about. I don't know if you've seen the movie Mean Girls. And Ezekiel warns us that Sodom was destroyed because they neglected the poor. It's not for homosexuality. And I don't understand why Mormons believe in the pride cycle, which was created by an institute or seminary teacher in the CES program way back in the day, as it was taught to me in seminary. That's how old it is. It's false doctrine, because it teaches that when you're righteous, you are materially prosperous, economically prosperous, and that when you're bad and wicked, you lose your wealth. You're poor, homeless, and so you brought upon yourself your poverty because of your wickedness. Can you imagine the horror if the Utah government applied that misdoctrinal teaching, incorrect doctrinal teaching, into the legal system? I mean, you might have a mayor of Salt Lake City who gets up and says the homeless are not allowed to have a place to live in a tent. They need to get out. But, in the next 4 years, we'll have another 300 capacity shelter for them. It's just that they can't live here now. Can you imagine the horror? Can you imagine if they created something like Operation Rio Grande. That sounds fun, doesn't it? You know, where they purposely divert the homeless from panhandling at Temple Square over to, I don't know, we'll call it a gateway mall. If you don't know Utah's history, yeah, it's like these Mormons have never read their Book of Mormon, or they don't believe it. They listened in seminary to the Pride Cycle and then retold all the stories of the Book of Mormon based on the Pride Cycle. Oh yeah, the Book of Mormon, it's about these two groups of people, the Nephites and the Lamanites. The Lamanites were good and were rich and prosperous, but the Lamanites were bad and were poor and homeless. Really? Is that what the Book of Mormon's narrowed down to in, what did we call it? I can't remember. It slips my mind. It was the Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes of the Book of Mormon. You'd get an F on your paper in school as the teachers, when they found out about Cliff Notes, said, don't use Cliff Notes. Read the book. Or, if you remember the video, read the damn Book of Mormon. But what's interesting is the Zoramites, they had two castes of Zoramites. You had the farmers who produced the food for the community and those who made clothing from the harvests, you know, cotton, for example. They don't tell us that in detail, but that's what we understand, is because the construction workers were the ones who built the synagogue. A synagogue. Not a cathedral. A synagogue. Does that ring any bells for Mormons? Are we Christian? Synagogue? Are you sure, Christian? And when they finished building, guess what? They were unemployed in Greenland. Princess Bride. And they were now poor. No money coming in. No food to be taken care of. The rich people were the farmers who provided the food and clothing for the community. And they therefore believed, well, you guys are not working, you guys are bums. We're not giving you of our food. Thus they were poor, kicked out of the synagogue. Synagogue, not cathedral. And so, yes, they were blamed for being poor. And they were told to get a job, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, and then they can come back to the synagogue, where they had the Ramyumptum and, oh God, we thank thee that we are better than our brethren, the Nephites. Isn't that great? Such Constantine Christian, Christ-like examples. Let's talk about synagogues. Let's just divert from the topic here for a second. The first synagogue is mentioned in Psalm 74:8. Let us destroy them. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. And so obviously it's King David, or is it Solomon in 74? And so obviously it's so old it goes back to the 18th dynasty of Egypt, right? You're listening to my videos, you know that Tawut Moshe is David Moses in Paleo Hebrew. King Tut, for those of you who don't know what Tawut Mose is. Otherwise, everything else is in Matthew and the Book of Mormon for synagogues. Well, the New Testament, not just Matthew. I'm seeing Matthew on the screen here. So, where did these 600 BCE Jews, obviously they had synagogues, right? Let's find out what archaeology says. Oh, that's science, Travis. Don't use science. That's fake news. The oldest evidence of the presence of synagogue buildings are found in Middle and Lower Egypt in the 3rd century BCE on Elephantine Island. That's not 600 BCE, and that's not even Jewish. They consist of 2 synagogue dedication inscription stones and a reference to a synagogue in a papyrus letter dated 218 BCE. Oh. Well, obviously that's mistaken, right? The Jewish one's got to be older than that. The excavated Jericho synagogue may be the oldest, securely dated, mainstream Jewish synagogue in the world. Although the identification of the remains as a synagogue is not certain. It was built between 70 and 50 BCE. Ooh, no. Uh-oh. As part of a royal winter palace complex near Jericho. Uh-oh. Is this an example of an anachronism in the Book of Mormon? Oops. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Which means that it's not a real history because there were no synagogues in existence. Why is it being translated as synagogue? Well, that was the original. Joseph Smith was... This is where listening to us who are ex-Mormon or who have not gone back to church, who have done our own research on church history, can fill you in on what you've been lied to and covered up with, deceived by the prophets, is that Sidney Rigdon is the major author of the Book of Mormon, and then there had to be somebody to redo the 116 pages that were written by someone other than Sidney Rigdon. It was a different manuscript. I wonder who wrote that manuscript and how that could have happened in Canandaigua, New York, where Joseph Smith Sr. was a master mason who knew Freemasonry code symbolism, as well as was a part of the New Israelites with Jewish mysticism in Vermont. Again, coded communication again. Yeah, I wonder if the Tree of Life may have something to do with Jewish mysticism of Joseph Smith Sr. after Jr. gives up the 116 pages to Martin Harris. Yeah, Mormons would be wise to be humble and teachable. Wouldn't ya, Mormons? Quit being the bad guys in the story of history. Because that's what we got going on. Mormons claim they are defenders of the faith. Oh, that sounds awesome, doesn't it? You have apologetics, defenders of the church. There's only one problem. Faith is not truth. Oh, you haven't read your Book of Mormon? You just read the Cliff Notes that told you about the pride cycle. Yes, prosperity comes from following the process given to us in Alma chapter 32, starting in verse 28. Oh yes, that's the Zoramites. Oh, he's talking to the poor Zoramites, telling them not to just have faith, is he? Oh, he's telling them to be defenders of truth, knowledge, not faith. Huh. Amazing what you can find in the Book of Mormon, isn't it? And so, yeah, ex-Mormons, if you're behaving like a Mormon, what the hell are you doing? You know the Mormons are wrong. The whole church, wrong, bad, corrupt. A corrupt seed cannot produce good fruit. And so Mormons, generation after generation, are taking the seeds of the corrupt fruit all the way back to Brigham Young. Missionaries go out as little kids saying, hey, church is true. They've never produced the fruit for themselves because they're defenders of the faith, not the truth. So why then are you behaving like Mormons? Oh, right, baggage. That's a hard thing to get rid of, isn't it? You have to recognize what is wrong. Because if the church are stealing, lying, covering up, deceiving, murdering, adultering, is that the word? Adulterers, leading Mormons astray, are white supremacists and all that that entails, and are just overall bad people, do you think that your issue is just with the lie that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, or that he's not a translator, or that, I don't know, whatever else, rather than recognizing that Brigham Young lied so that Brigham Young could justify doing it? Yeah, remember? Joseph did all this bad stuff in secret. But Brigham Young, well, Joseph was doing it in secret. He didn't have the courage. He wasn't a defender of the faith. I, Brigham Young, will make it public. You couldn't catch on to that, could you? See, the church covered up Brigham Young. And so you've exposed Brigham Young. But Brigham Young is saying Joseph Smith to justify what he did. And so you think he's telling you the truth about Joseph? What? A bad fruit only comes from bad seed. You can't produce good fruit from bad seed. Mormons will tell you you can because they're defenders of the faith. Yes, you can repent and change the bad seed into a good fruit. No, you can't. You have to get rid of all the corrupt seeds that have been planted in you in the Mormon church. That is all the indoctrinating that was done to you. You've got to purge it from your mind. And that's tough because you have to recognize it. And if you've been born and raised in it, it's difficult to recognize the corruption that has been instilled in you. And so the popular Mormons who keep their circular clique and exclude those of us who don't fit their agenda, you're acting like a Mormon because of your baggage. So cut it out. You're supposed to love, not hate. Remember, Mormons hate.